After the First World War and the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian dual monarchy, Hungary was reduced to less than a third of its size thanks to the Treaty of Trianon. As a smaller country surrounded by larger neighbors, Hungary made border revision the cornerstone of its foreign policy in the interwar period. This would not be easy, as Hungary faced resistance from the Little Entente, an alliance of Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia with the backing of France. Hungary began strengthening its ties with Germany, which it saw as its best chance to revise Trianon, despite Berlin's expansionist goals clashing with Budapest's territorial aims. At first, Hitler was reluctant to support Hungarian revisionism, fearing it would strengthen the Little Entente and complicate his plans to conquer Czechoslovakia. But the late 1930s changed everything. After taking over Austria in 1938, Hitler courted Hungary's support for his move against Czechoslovakia. Hungary was hesitant to risk war, but its support paid off. Through German-Italian arbitration, Hungary gained nearly 12,000 square kilometers, or 7,457 square miles, of southern Slovakia in what became known as the First Vienna Award. After Hitler dismantled Czechoslovakia in 1939, the region of Carpatho-Ukraine declared itself an independent republic and appealed to Germany for recognition and support. German officials did not reply, and the short-lived state was invaded by Hungary, crushing all local resistance by March 18, 1939. Hungary, however, did not always align with Germany. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Hungary refused to take part and instead let more than 100,000 Polish refugees cross its border. Hungarian Prime Minister Pál Teleki pursued a policy of neutrality and revisionism, seeking to regain lost land without being dragged into major conflicts. In 1940, Hungary's ambitions grew when the Soviet Union seized the regions of Bessarabia and northern Bukovina from Romania. Hitler called for Hungarian-Romanian negotiations, which resulted in the Second Vienna Award. Hungary gained 43,000 square kilometers of northern Transylvania. To secure its position, Hungary signed the Tripartite Pact with Germany, Italy, and Japan on November 20th, 1940. Up to this point, Hungary had regained territory mostly without fighting, but once it formally joined the Axis, this would change. By this point, Yugoslavia was the only remnant of the Little Entente still free from Axis influence. But this would not last. In March 1941, the Yugoslav-Hungarian Treaty of Eternal Friendship was signed in Belgrade, and just a few days later, Yugoslavia joined the Tripartite Pact. This only lasted 2 days. On March 27th, a Yugoslav coup d'etat overthrew the regency led by Prince Paul, and 17-year-old King Peter II took full power. The coup triggered plans for the German-led Axis invasion of Yugoslavia, and Hungary was pressured to join. Unwilling, Hungarian Prime Minister Pál Teleki took his own life with a pistol on the night of April 3, 1941. His suicide note said, "We broke our word. Out of cowardice. The nation feels it, and we have thrown away its honor. We have allied ourselves with scoundrels." Nonetheless, the invasion went ahead, with Hungary taking part. The Yugoslav army crumbled quickly under German firepower, and Hungarian troops soon crossed the border. A few days after the German attack began, Hungary regained the regions of Vojvodina, the Baranja Triangle, and Murakaz, while facing little resistance from the overwhelmed Yugoslavs. As a result of the invasion, Britain broke off diplomatic relations with Hungary but did not declare war, likely because of Teleki's suicide. The Hungarian authorities divided the occupied population into two groups: those living in the region before 1918 and those who had arrived in the interwar years. To reverse this, they pursued their own ethnic policies, which expelled Yugoslavs and redistributed land to Hungarians. Hungarian political parties and patriotic organizations were encouraged, while Serbs, Croats, Jews, and Romani faced systematic discrimination in education and culture. The Jewish population of the occupied territories was subjected to forced labor. Ethnic Germans also faced discrimination until Hitler intervened. After that, Germans received special privileges, even appointing their own officials in German-majority towns. The occupation was violent, fueled by stereotypes and prejudices against the Serbs. Hungarian soldiers were even handed a leaflet describing Serbs as a conspiratorial people prone to rebellion, violence, and even bloody solutions. Unlike the Wehrmacht, which on paper required prisoners to be handed over to military police or security services, Hungarian soldiers were given more freedom to act as judges in the field. Collaboration also occurred between the occupiers and local civilians looking to protect their interests. Resistance to Hungarian rule eventually broke out, with the harshest suppression occurring later in January 1942. This became the infamous Novi Sad raid, during which around 3,500 people were killed. The Hungarian actions drew criticism from the mayor of Novi Sad, the Germans, and from members of the Hungarian parliament. Regent Miklós Horthy later ordered a follow-up investigation into the massacre, and the charges were brought against those responsible. Many, however, fled to Germany. The Second World War was the most destructive conflict in human history, and for those who lived through it, it must have felt like the end of the world. Rebuilding after such devastation isn't easy, but thanks to today's sponsor, the book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, you'll be ready to pick up the pieces if you ever find yourself in a post-apocalyptic world. More than just a survival guide, the book is a stunning, illustrated encyclopedia of humankind's greatest inventions and discoveries, an inspiring visual journey through the history of innovation. This premium hardcover is printed on matte art paper, spans over 400 pages, and covers 180 fascinating topics, from making fire to spinning yarn to how a steam engine works. It even has a section on Santa Claus just in time for the holidays. I especially love the book's unique illustrations, which deliver rare knowledge through a creative combination of engineering drawings and medieval art styles, inspiring deeper thinking. The book is the perfect holiday gift for family, friends, or even yourself, and you can also grab it as part of the Ultimate Christmas Bundle, which includes The Last Book, a haunting story told from the perspective of the last human on Earth, and Octopolis, the world's most challenging jigsaw puzzle. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the description and use code HISTORIAN at checkout to save 10% when you order the book today. After Germany dismembered Yugoslavia, it turned to the Soviet Union. Initially, Germany did not request Hungarian participation, and Hungary was not substantively briefed, only advised to reinforce its borders. Hitler knew the Hungarian army had serious deficiencies and feared that Hungary would make more territorial demands if it joined. Just days before the invasion, Germany informed Hungary of its plans. German General Alfred Jodl stated that any Hungarian assistance would be gratefully accepted, though not required. Meanwhile, the Soviets sought to reassure Hungary. In June 1941, Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov declared that the Soviet Union had no hostile demands toward Hungary and did not oppose its territorial expansion at Romania's expense. Nevertheless, Hungarian leaders believed Germany would reach Moscow within 6 weeks. Soon after, Hungary broke off diplomatic relations with the USSR. The casus belli came on June 26th. Soviet planes had strafed a train near Rahov and bombed Kassa. Cyrillic letters were found on bomb fragments suggesting Soviet origin, though it remains a mystery why the USSR would bomb Kassa. That same day, Hungary declared war on the Soviet Union. Hungary sent its most equipped field army, the Second Army, into Russia to support the Germans. German observers noted the Hungarians for their particular cruelty, with occupied people subjected to arbitrary violence, described as murder tourism. The Hungarians, along with the Italians and Romanians, joined the Germans in the 1942 summer offensive, Ball-Blau. During the offensive, Romanian and Hungarian units had to be separated, with an Italian division placed between them to contain their bitter rivalry. In summer 1942, the Second Army participated in the Battle of Voronezh as part of Germany's Army Group B. The Hungarian troops fought in and around the city and along the Don River, supporting the German 4th Panzer Army. Without adequate air, artillery, and armor support, all assaults were carried out by infantry units, causing the Hungarian Second Army to suffer heavy casualties. Lack of transportation was so severe that some divisions marched over 1,000 kilometers, or 621 miles, on foot to the contact line. As winter set in, the German situation worsened around Stalingrad, and the Second Army's transportation collapsed, leaving frontline units without basic necessities such as food, winter clothing, fuel, and building materials. Demoralized troops were left holding long stretches of the front as more German units poured into Stalingrad. This created a dangerously thin line, with some sectors having only a single platoon to defend entire kilometers or miles without effective firepower. Soviet Field Marshal Georgy Zhukov observed, "Compared with the Germans, the troops of these satellites were not so well armed, less experienced and less efficient, even in defense." Like other armies guarding the flanks of the German 6th Army, the Second Army was annihilated in the Soviet counteroffensive of the winter of 1942 to 1943. The Soviet breakthrough at the Don River sliced directly through the Hungarian units. After the fall of Stalingrad in January 1943, Hungarian troops were ordered to stand and fight to the death. Dumbfounded by this brazen command, they tried in vain to retreat, but most were taken prisoner by the Soviets. The Hungarian Second Army suffered around 143,000 total casualties and ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. Nonetheless, other Hungarian units occupied parts of Ukraine and later Belarus, guarding supply lines and fighting Soviet partisans. Hungarian troops were also stationed in Poland, where they refused to help suppress the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. After 2 years of war against the Soviets, Hungarian Prime Minister Miklós Kálay began peace negotiations with the United States and United Kingdom in autumn of 1943. In 1944, Regent Miklós Horthy secretly started peace talks with the Soviet Union. Berlin was already suspicious of the Hungarians, so the German General Staff prepared a plan to invade and occupy Hungary. This plan would come into effect in March of 1944, codenamed Operation Margareta. On March 19th, German forces crossed the border into Hungary. While some Hungarian units offered little resistance, most did not. In some places, the Germans were even received warmly, due to confusion about Germany's true intentions. Horthy was allowed to maintain his position as head of the Hungarian government. In May 1944, the Nazi administration, alongside the Hungarian Gendarmerie, began transporting Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. Under pressure from Allied contacts and the Pope, Horthy used his remaining influence to discontinue the transports and later arranged an armistice with the Soviets. In response, the Germans launched Operation Panzerfaust. Horthy was taken into custody by the SS and was demanded to resign and appoint Szálasi of the fascist Aerocross Party as prime minister. Initially, Horthy refused, but finally gave in when the Germans threatened his family. Up to this point, Jews had been relatively safe in Hungary, but this changed with Szálasi and the Aerocross in power. Thousands of Jews were rounded up and deported to Auschwitz. In Budapest, Jews were taken from the ghetto, lined up on the riverbank, and shot so that their bodies fell into the Danube. Szálasi attempted to increase deportations of Jews, but Germany's rapidly disintegrating communication lines largely prevented this from happening. Nonetheless, even with the Aerocross Party at the helm, Hungary's Eastern Front situation continued to deteriorate, as the Soviets broke the Germans in the south and entered Romania, which promptly switched sides. In late 1944, the Red Army and its Romanian allies launched a series of major battles in Romania and Hungary, pushing back German and Hungarian forces. By October, Hungary had become a battlefield. Soviet forces were fighting through fierce German-Hungarian counterattacks to capture Debrecen, crippling Axis defenses and opening the road to Budapest. In late December 1944, Budapest became encircled. Heavy fighting erupted throughout the city as the Red Army began its assault. Nearly 33,000 German and 37,000 Hungarian soldiers, as well as over 800,000 civilians, were trapped within the city. Refusing to authorize a withdrawal, Adolf Hitler had declared Budapest a fortress city, which was to be defended to the last man. The defense was to be led by Waffen-SS General Karl Pfeffer-Wildenbruch. On December 26th, the Soviets encircled the city as street fighting began. During the night of December 28th, the 2nd and 3rd Ukrainian Front contacted the besieged German and Hungarians by radio and loudspeakers, promising to provide humane surrender conditions and to not mistreat prisoners. The next day, two groups of Soviet emissaries appeared to negotiate. What exactly happened to them later is unclear, but both leaders of the groups died. Germans utilized the lull in the fighting to strengthen the city's defenses, peppering it with barricades and tank traps, and fortifying buildings and houses. Nonetheless, the start of 1945 provided no initial respite, as sharp attacks were launched toward Sas Hill in the southwest and Matthias Hill in the northwest. The Soviet offensive began in the eastern suburbs, advancing through the area of Pest, making good use of broad central avenues to speed up their progress. The German and Hungarian defenders, overwhelmed, tried to trade space for time and slow down the Soviet advance. They ultimately withdrew to shorten their lines, hoping to take advantage of the hilly geography of Buda. In response, Hitler ordered the 4th SS Panzer Corps to relieve Budapest. Commanded by SS General Herbert Gilla and fielding 200 tanks and 60,000 men, it was one of the largest strategic reserves that the Germans possessed. With Western Hungary serving as Germany's last vital source of oil, Hitler even prioritized the operation over reinforcing Poland against an imminent Soviet offensive. The counteroffensive began from the German base at Komárom, pushing southeast toward Bicska and Budapest. With rare support from the now depleted Luftwaffe, Gilla's forces advanced over the following days to Bicska, reaching within only a few dozen kilometers of Buda. Unfortunately for the Germans, the attack bogged down due to the terrain and Soviet reserves. By this point, the defenses of the Buda bridgehead had solidified and were based on several strongpoints: the embankment, Buda Castle, Farkasredi Cemetery, and Sas Hill. In Pest, the Allied Romanian army reached Rákos Creek, while the Soviets took about 200 city blocks on January 1st. Over the next few days, the defenses stiffened, but deep thrusts into Pest caused the Germans to pull back even further. As a result of the compression of the encirclement, the struggle for the city increased in intensity, with the Soviets advancing through holes blasted in buildings instead of along the narrow streets swept by the German guns. Fighting even broke out in the sewers, as both sides used them to hide troop movements. With fierce house-to-house fighting going on, fires could not be put out, and the dead could not be buried, which led to the whole city being covered with a nauseating stench of decay, death, and burning bodies. German tanks tried to fight in the open spaces and parks, but they ran out of fuel and ammunition. By the 17th, The defenses in Pest had been split into three, and the Germans decided to retreat across the Danube and blow the bridges. The Axis held a front line running from Matthias Hill in the north through Város Major to the Manuel's railway embankment to the south, with some new reinforcements arriving from the east side of the river. Nonetheless, the German 4th SS Panzer Corps struck again in the south of the city over the morning of January 18th. They made rapid progress, taking the 4th Guards Army by surprise and crushing the counterattacking 7th Mechanized Corps. The advancing panzers swept all away and reached the Danube on January 19th. By the 26th, German forces were only about 15 miles or 25 kilometers from the southern suburbs of Budapest, and at least some of the garrison should have been able to fight their way out to meet the relief force. However, German troops were unable to maintain their momentum due to fatigue and supply problems. The city's defenders requested permission to leave the encirclement, but Hitler refused, insisting that Budapest be recaptured rather than the defenders rescued. Soviet counterattacks began on January 27th. On the first day, the Germans destroyed 122 Soviet tanks, but were ultimately forced back to their starting positions. Following the arrival of additional Soviet reinforcements, the window for relief was lost. By the beginning of February, the relief operation had failed. With Pest having fallen, the fight for Buda picked up steam, and the Axis defense was beginning to unravel. Supplies were running out, and once news arrived that the relief effort had failed, the defense began to collapse even more rapidly. Nonetheless, despite the lack of supplies, most Axis troops refused to surrender and defended every street and house. A desperate counterattack against the Soviets was scraped together, involving the Hungarian 10th Division, the 13th Panzer, and 200 high school pupils who had been recruited just 2 days earlier. The attack quickly failed, resulting in horrific casualties among the untrained, poorly equipped schoolchildren. By now, the defenders were in a 3-mile or 5-kilometer pocket that crammed nearly 35,000 German and Hungarian troops, along with 10,000 wounded and 300,000 Hungarian civilians. On February 5th, Hitler refused a request from the Buda garrison to try and break out. Even if the garrison was down to its last ammunition and holed up in 2 pockets, neither of which was large enough to receive airdrops. Unsurprisingly, the Soviets took strongpoint after strongpoint, day after day in the city, taking all of southern Buda except for the citadel. Despite Hitler's orders, on the morning of the 11th, Pfeffer-Wildenbruch ordered a breakout. The breakout was to begin at nightfall, attacking along a half-mile or 1-kilometer front in 3 waves. First, the 13th Panzer and 8th SS Cavalry, followed by the 60th Panzer Grenadier Division and remnants of the 22nd SS Cavalry Division, then finally the walking wounded, baggage trains, and civilians. That night, they tried to break out, but huge crowds clogged the streets, preventing many troops in the first wave from reaching the front. The breakout quickly descended into chaos. On one street, attackers were cut down by Soviet fire, while on another, small groups slipped through unnoticed. Of the 30,000 Germans and Hungarians, fewer than 700 made it to the German lines. Some hid out in forests well into the spring and summer of 1945 before finally surrendering. After the breakout, Soviet troops quickly mopped up the last pockets of resistance. Within a few days, the city had fallen. From the first Soviet tanks appearing on the outskirts of Budapest to its final defeat, 102 days had passed. It was the 4th longest siege on the Eastern Front and the longest of any European capital. On February 13th, the siege and Battle of Budapest came to its end, with over 100,000 German prisoners taken in the fight for the city. The battle was fought continuously over the heads of 800,000 civilians, as there was no large-scale evacuation. half of all the casualties on the defending side were civilians, including around 15,000 Jews murdered by fascist militias. Despite Soviet orders against mistreating civilians and prisoners of war, deserters flooded Budapest after the battle, leading to looting and mass rape. The siege of Budapest left the city devastated. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed, essential services collapsed, and tens of thousands of survivors faced a harsh winter with limited food and shelter. A Soviet-backed counter-government was proclaimed in Debrecen, and ethnic Germans in Hungary were arrested and transported to the Soviet Union as forced laborers. In some villages, the entire adult population was taken to labor camps in the Donets Basin, where many died. In March 1945, the Germans attempted a final counteroffensive near Lake Balaton, Operation Spring Awakening, but it failed. By April, Hungary was fully under Soviet control. The Aerocross regime collapsed alongside Nazi Germany and was officially abolished on May 7, 1945, just one day before Germany's unconditional surrender.